3 days ago, I sat across from a lawyer in a sterile conference room, read a single sheet of legal paper, and laughed until the attorney stopped writing and asked if I needed water. I'm Morgan Hayes, 32 years old. My parents and I hadn't exchanged a word in 24 months. No birthday wishes, no casual check-ins, no passive-aggressive holiday cards, just absolute radio silence. Then out of nowhere, their attorney mailed me one piece of paper, 1 page. They needed my signature to finalize the sale of my grandfather's cabin, the only place on earth that ever felt like sanctuary. That document was designed to strip something away from me. Instead, it delivered something my family never gave me, irrefutable evidence that somebody in my bloodline believed I was worthy of protection. Before I tell you what was inside that envelope, I need you to understand where this story begins. It started at a holiday dinner that shattered everything. I was raised outside Nashville, Tennessee, in one of those towns where neighbors wave from their porches and everyone knows your business before you do. My father, Richard Hayes, managed the local credit union. Solid reputation, firm handshake, the kind of man who wore starched shirts to church every Sunday without fail. My mother, Patricia, ran the women's auxiliary group and coordinated the annual fall festival. From the outside, they looked like a catalog family, the kind you'd see in a framed photograph at a department store. Then there was my younger sister, Emily, 2 years behind me and somehow always 2 steps ahead in my parents' estimation. Emily received piano instruction. I heard maybe next year. Emily got a used sedan for her 16th birthday. I received a bus pass and a suggestion to look for part-time work. Emily occupied the larger bedroom because she required space to practice her instrument. I shared a wall with the washing machine and learned to sleep through the spin cycle. I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm telling you because it's relevant. My parents never raised a hand to me. They never shouted. They simply allocated their attention differently, like I was a line item they could reduce without consequence. My father had a phrase he deployed whenever I objected. He'd place his fork down, fix me with that patient expression, and say, "Emily needs more support. You're resilient, Morgan. That's what I admire about you." I bought that explanation for years. I wore resilient like a medal. I worked double shifts at the diner throughout high school, purchased my own prom dress, covered my own textbooks. It took me until adulthood to understand that in my father's vocabulary, resilient didn't mean admirable. It meant undemanding. It meant she won't complain. It meant she's not worth the investment. I became the first person in my family to earn a college degree, a bachelor's in finance from the State University, earned while working 25 hours weekly at a small accounting office. 4 years. No financial assistance, no parental co-signers, just me and an alarm clock set for 5:15 every morning. My parents said they'd attend my graduation. My mother selected the outfit she'd wear. My father inquired about parking arrangements. I reserved 4 seats, 2 for them, 1 for Emily, 1 for my grandfather, Harold Hayes, the only person who never made me feel like an afterthought. The morning of commencement, my phone rang at 7 a.m. "Something came up," my father said. "Your sister's moving into her new apartment and needs help with the furniture." I stood in my dormitory room clutching a pressed blouse and discount heels. I could hear my mother in the background asking Richard where the packing tape was. "It's just a ceremony," my mother called out. "You already have the degree, sweetheart." I walked across that stage alone, sat among strangers' families, took my own photograph using my phone's timer balanced against a park bench. That afternoon, my phone rang again, my grandfather. "I'm proud of you, Morgan," he said. His voice had that rough quality it always acquired when he was fighting emotion. "And don't worry, I already handled it. I didn't understand what he meant. I assumed he was referring to a card, maybe a check tucked inside." I wouldn't comprehend what Grandpa Harold truly meant that day for another 7 years. I met Nathan Reeves when I was 26. He was rewiring the office building where I'd just started as a junior financial analyst. I heard him before I saw him, humming under his breath while running conduit behind ceiling tiles. Something by Johnny Cash, off-key but committed. Nathan was an electrician, licensed and bonded, running his own small operation from a used van with his name painted on the side. He worked 12-hour days, his hands calloused, his boots worn. He brought me gas station wildflowers on our third date because he said the florist was closed and he refused to arrive empty-handed. We married when I was 28. Small ceremony. Courthouse steps. Grandpa Harold had passed 3 years earlier, and I still felt the absence he left every time something good happened, and I couldn't share it with him. My parents attended briefly. At a family dinner the following week, my father sat at the head of the table, regarded Nathan across the roasted chicken, and said with that calm that makes you question your hearing, "I thought you'd aim higher. Morgan, an electrician. That's settling." My mother pressed her lips together. Emily scrolled through her phone. Nathan didn't react. On the drive home, he stared straight ahead and said, "I don't need your dad to respect my job, but I need him to respect you." I wanted to cut contact right then. I almost did. But Grandpa Harold had only been gone 3 years, and something kept me holding on. Some stubborn belief that he'd want me to keep trying, keep showing up, keep being the strong one. So I stayed a little longer. It happened at Christmas. 15 people packed into my parents' living room. Aunts, uncles, cousins. The kind of gathering where someone's always refilling sweet tea and nobody notices when the music shifts. Emily pulled me aside in the kitchen. She needed $5,000. Third time she'd asked. The first 2 loans, her word, not mine, were still unpaid. She said it was for inventory for a boutique she was opening. I said no, politely, clearly. She walked back into the living room with tear-filled eyes and a trembling lip. My father rose from his recliner like he'd been triggered. "What kind of sister refuses to help her own family?" He said it loud enough for everyone to hear. My aunt froze mid-pour over the punch bowl. My cousin stared with wide eyes. "You've changed, Morgan," Richard said, "and not for the better." Then my mother leaned toward my aunt, conspiratorial, and said just loudly enough, "She's been like this since she married that man. I honestly think she needs professional help." The room went silent. 15 people. Not one spoke. My aunt looked at the floor. My uncle coughed and reached for a cookie. My cousin stared like she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. I stood in the center of that room and felt something I hadn't felt since graduation day, invisible, surrounded by people, and completely alone. I put on my coat, kissed my cousin's baby on the forehead, and walked out of that house for the last time. Nathan was already at the door, keys in hand, jaw tight. 2 years of silence. You'd think it would feel peaceful. No phone calls, no guilt trips, no holiday minefields. But silence isn't empty. It's full of what others fill it with. Within weeks of that Christmas, my parents had constructed a narrative and distributed it widely. Richard called relatives. Patricia cornered friends at church. The story was clean and simple. Morgan is emotionally unstable. Nathan is isolating her from the family. She requires professional intervention. My cousin Rachel called in January. Your mom told me you're seeing a therapist. She said you had some kind of breakdown at Christmas. Are you okay? I had never mentioned therapy to anyone because I wasn't in therapy. My mother fabricated it and served it to people who trusted her. It escalated. Richard called my former supervisor, a man I'd worked for through college, to check on me. In a town that small, that call wasn't concern. It was a grenade with a polite fuse. Rachel told me later that my father described me to relatives as possibly a danger to herself. Those were his exact words. He weaponized mental health terminology against his own daughter because she refused to hand over $5,000 and sit quietly while her mother labeled her defective in front of family. One by one, the calls stopped. Aunts I used to hear from at Easter, cousins who sent birthday texts. Then the circle tightened around Richard and Patricia like a drawstring, and I was outside it. By spring, the only person from my old life who still called was Rachel. Nathan and I moved to a town 45 minutes east, close enough to return if I ever wanted to. Far enough that I didn't have to see my father at the hardware store on Saturdays. I earned a promotion to senior financial analyst at a firm that didn't know my family and didn't ask. Nathan's business expanded. He hired a second electrician, then a third. We bought a small house with a porch, a backyard, and a kitchen window that caught the morning light. It was a quiet life. A good life. But every Christmas, I'd catch myself staring at my phone, scrolling through contacts, hovering over names I couldn't bring myself to delete. Nobody called. Not once. Nathan never pushed me. He'd sit with me on the couch, some game on mute, and just be present. One night, I asked him, "Do you think I made a mistake?" He didn't hesitate. "You'll know when you're ready, and if that day never comes, that's okay too." I drove past the cabin once, Grandpa Harold's place out on Cedar Mill Road. The dock was starting to sag. The paint on the shutters had gone gray. I slowed down but didn't stop. It hurt too much. Everything about that house was him. The cedar smell, the screen doors creak, the way he'd always have a chocolate milkshake waiting for me on Fridays when he picked me up from school. I kept driving. 2 years passed like that. Ordinary days stacked on top of each other. I was healing, slowly, unevenly, but healing. Then, on a Tuesday in March, an envelope arrived. It had a law firm's return address I'd never seen before, addressed specifically to Morgan Hayes. That envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 2 days before I opened it. 2 years of silence, and then a letter from an attorney. If you've ever cut contact with a family member and received that unexpected call or letter, you know the feeling, that cold drop in your stomach. I opened it at the kitchen table on a Thursday morning. Nathan was already out on a job. The coffee was still hot. The house was quiet. The letter was from a Mr. Brennan, attorney at law based in my parents' town. Professional letterhead, clean font, 1 page. It stated that Richard Hayes was initiating the sale of a residential property at 14 Cedar Mill Road, Grandpa Harold's cabin. And that as a potential heir to the estate of Harold Hayes, I was being asked to sign a quitclaim deed, waiving any claim to the property. There was a signature line at the bottom, a 30-day deadline, and a phone number for Brennan's office. I read it 3 times. 2 years, not a birthday card, not a "how are you," not even a forwarded chain email, and the first time my family reaches out, it's through a law firm asking me to surrender the last thing Grandpa Harold ever touched. I set the letter down and looked across the kitchen at the small wooden shelf Nathan had built above the stove. On it sat Grandpa Harold's tackle box, cedar wood, brass hinges, his initials carved into the lid. It still smelled like lake water and linseed oil. Inside that tackle box, tucked against the bottom, was a sealed envelope I'd kept for 7 years. I'd found it when clearing out his things after the funeral. Yellowed paper taped shut with his handwriting on the front for Morgan when you need it. I'd never opened it. I assumed it was a farewell letter, something sentimental that would make me cry. That night, for the first time in 7 years, I opened Grandpa Harold's envelope. My hands were steady until I tore the seal. Inside were 2 things. First, a legal document, heavy paper, stamped and notarized. The heading read, Revocable Trust Deed, Harold R. Hayes Family Trust. Below it, in clean type, the property at 14 Cedar Mill Road, commonly known as the cabin, was held in irrevocable trust. The trustee was a Mr. Calloway, Grandpa Harold's personal attorney. The sole beneficiary was listed on page 3, Morgan Hayes. The second item was a single sheet of notebook paper folded twice. His handwriting slanted, deliberate, the way a man writes when his hands are strong, but his patience with pens is limited. Morgan, I know your father. He means well, but he doesn't see straight when it comes to your sister. This house is yours. It's always been yours. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Grandpa H. I sat on the bedroom floor with my back against the dresser and cried. Not the kind of crying that breaks you apart, the kind that puts something back together. He knew. Before I ever walked out of that Christmas dinner, before I ever met Nathan, before I stopped answering my father's calls, Grandpa Harold saw all of it. And he didn't just feel sorry for me. He did something about it. Nathan came home that night and found me sitting there, papers spread across the quilt. He sat down on the floor beside me, put his hand on my shoulder, and didn't say a word. The next morning, I called Mr. Calloway. He answered on the second ring. The trust is valid, he said. It's never been challenged. Your father's name doesn't appear anywhere in the documents. He saw me. He always saw me. I called Brennan's office that afternoon. The receptionist had the kind of voice that tells you she's already decided what you're there for. Are you calling to return the signed document, Miss Hayes? I'd like to come in, I said. I have some questions about the document before I sign. A pause, keyboard clicking. Mr. Brennan is available Friday at 10. Friday works. I hung up and called Calloway back. I asked him to prepare certified copies of the trust deed, the original filing, the county stamp, the beneficiary schedule, everything. I'll have it ready by Thursday, he said. Ms. Hayes, do you want me to be present at the meeting? No, but I'd like you available by phone. Understood. I spent the next 5 days doing something I hadn't done in 2 years, preparing, not emotionally. I was past that. I prepared the way an accountant prepares for an audit, documents in order, facts in rows, nothing left to assumption. I read the trust deed front to back 3 times. I pulled the county clerk's filing records online to confirm the transfer date. I compared it against the probate records from Grandpa Harold's estate and confirmed what Calloway had told me. The cabin was transferred into the trust before Harold died. It never passed through probate. Richard never inherited it. He just assumed he did. And nobody ever told him otherwise, because the only person who knew was Grandpa Harold. Nathan asked me on Thursday night if I wanted him to come along. I shook my head. This one's mine. He kissed my forehead and handed me a thermos of coffee for the drive. The night before the meeting, Rachel called. I need to tell you something. Your dad's been calling everyone, not just family. Everyone. He's stressed, Morgan, really stressed. About the house? About Emily's store? It's in serious trouble. She took out business loans. Your dad co-signed all of them. I sat on the porch and let that settle. The crickets were loud. Nathan was inside washing dishes. Rachel kept going. 8 months ago, your dad refinanced the mortgage on their house and put the money into the boutique. Your mom signed off. Now the boutique's failing. The loans are due, and your dad owes the bank on his personal guarantee. I think it's around $180,000. $180,000. My father, the banker, the responsible one, the man who called Nathan a downgrade, had gambled his retirement and his home on Emily's clothing store. He found a buyer for the cabin, Rachel said. $320,000, enough to cover the guarantee and keep the boutique going another 6 months. And the only thing standing between him and that sale is your signature. Morgan, he told everyone you'd sign. He said, Morgan has no use for that house anyway. I stared at the dark tree line beyond our backyard. The same sky stretched over Cedar Mill Road. Thank you for telling me, Rachel. What are you going to do? I'm going to that meeting. Friday came. I set Grandpa Harold's tackle box on the passenger seat, the one that still smelled like cedar and lake water. I tucked the folder of trust documents into my bag. Then I drove 45 minutes back to the town I'd left behind. The drive was muscle memory. My hands knew the turns before my brain registered the road signs. Past the gas station where Grandpa Harold used to buy me milkshakes. Past the middle school where I'd won a spelling bee and nobody from my family attended because Emily had a dance recital the same night. Past the intersection where Grandpa Harold's pickup used to idle, waiting for me with the window down and the radio on. The town hadn't changed. Same brick storefronts on Main Street, same faded mural on the side of the hardware store, same church steeple poking through the trees. I slowed at the stoplight, looked down at the folder on the passenger seat, certified copies, county stamps, trust deed, Callaway's business card. I thought about the last time I'd asked my father about Grandpa Harold's estate. It was at the funeral reception, 3 days after they lowered the casket. I was 25, red-eyed, holding a plate of food I couldn't eat. Did Grandpa leave a will? I'd asked. Richard barely looked up from his conversation. He didn't have much. The cabin comes to me as next of kin. That's how it works. He said it the way he said most things, like a man so used to being right that he'd stopped checking. He never hired a lawyer, never searched county records, never considered that his own father might have made different arrangements. The light turned green. I pressed the gas. I wasn't going back to fight. I was going back to finish what Grandpa Harold started. Brennan's office occupied the second floor of a red brick building on Main Street above a dental practice. The stairwell smelled like old carpet and coffee that had been sitting on a warmer since dawn. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain, looked me up and down when I gave my name. Have a seat, Miss Hayes, Mr. Brennan will be with you shortly. There was something in her tone, not rude exactly, more like rehearsed sympathy, the kind people use when they've already heard a version of your story and decided who the villain is. I sat in a vinyl chair next to a fern that was losing the will to live, opened my bag, checked the folder one more time, trust deed, certified copy, county filing receipt. Callaway's card with his direct number circled, Grandpa Harold's handwritten letter sealed in a clear sleeve. Everything accounted for. I closed the folder and rested my hands on top of it. My heart was steady. My breathing was even. I'd spent 2 years being called unstable by people who couldn't keep a boutique open for 18 months. I could handle a conference room. The hallway clock ticked past 9:58. A phone rang somewhere behind the front desk. I heard a door open. Ms. Hayes. Brennan's voice was polished, mid-50s, silver at the temples. The kind of man who says let's get this squared away and expects it to happen. He stepped aside and gestured toward the conference room. I stood, tucked my bag over my shoulder, and walked through the door. And there, sitting at the far end of the table in a pressed shirt with his hands folded in front of him, was my father. Richard looked up when I walked in. Same jaw, same posture, same way of holding a room like he'd already measured it and found it acceptable. "Hello, Morgan." His voice was calm, gentle, the concerned father register, pitched low enough to sound caring, controlled enough to remind you who's in charge. I stopped 2 steps inside the doorway and looked at Brennan. I was told this was a meeting between me and your office. Brennan adjusted his tie. "Mr. Hayes asked to be present. I thought it might facilitate things." "Facilitate?" I repeated the word the way you'd hold up a garment in the wrong size, studied it, set it back on the rack. I sat down across from my father, set my bag on the chair beside me, placed my folder on the table, and didn't open it. Richard leaned forward, elbows on the mahogany, and smiled. "Sit down, sweetheart. Let's get this done quick. I know you're busy." "Look," he said, tilting his head in a way that was supposed to look conciliatory, "I know things have been difficult, but this isn't about us. This is about the house. Your grandfather would have wanted this." He used Grandpa Harold's name. He sat across from me in a lawyer's conference room, the first time we'd been in the same space in 2 years, and he used the name of the one person who ever stood in my corner to try to move me out of it. My fingers rested on the edge of my folder. That's when I knew this was never going to end unless I ended it. Not with anger, not with a scene. With the truth, sitting in a manila folder on a conference table, waiting to be read. Richard straightened in his chair and clicked into sales mode, the same cadence he used at the bank when explaining loan terms to people who didn't read fine print. "The house has been sitting empty for years. Nobody's using it. I've got a buyer ready to close at $320,000. Your sister's business needs a bridge loan, and this solves the problem clean." Brennan slid a document across the table. I looked down at it, quitclaim deed in bold at the top, a signature line at the bottom with my name typed beneath it. I picked it up and read it slowly. Every word. Every clause. The room was quiet except for my father tapping his index finger against the table, a rhythm he probably didn't know he was making. I set the document down. "You haven't asked me how I am." Richard blinked. "What?" 2 years. This is the first contact, and it came through a law firm. I kept my voice flat, not angry, just clear. "You didn't call. You didn't write. You sent a lawyer." He shifted in his seat. "We've been trying to reach you. My phone number hasn't changed." Brennan cleared his throat. Richard ignored him. "Morgan, I'm not here to rehash the past. I'm here to handle a piece of property. That's all. And if I don't sign?" The tapping stopped. Richard's jaw tightened the way it always did when someone challenged a number on his spreadsheet. Then we all wait longer. It costs everyone more money. "Don't make this complicated, Morgan. Don't make this complicated." The same man who told 15 people I was mentally unstable. The same man who skipped my graduation. The same man who called my husband a downgrade. Don't make this complicated. I leaned back in my chair. Before I do anything, I'd like to understand why I wasn't told about the sale before a lawyer sent me a letter. Richard's expression shifted, not a crack exactly, more a recalibration. He turned to Brennan the way a man turns to a witness stand. "We haven't been able to reach her," he said, not to me, to the lawyer. "She cut off the entire family 2 years ago." No explanation. No explanation? Richard shook his head slowly, performing sadness the way he performed everything with structure. "She's been going through a difficult time." He was doing it again. Same playbook, same stage directions. "Tell the room I'm broken. Make the room feel sorry for him." Brennan was writing something on his legal pad. I couldn't see what. "Her husband," Richard added, dropping his voice a notch, "has been a bit controlling. We worry about her environment." I felt my pulse tick up. Not from fear, from the precision of it. 2 years later, and the script hadn't changed a single word. He'd rehearsed it so many times it sounded like gospel. Brennan set his pen down and glanced at me. I could see the question forming behind his eyes. Is this true? I didn't defend myself. I didn't correct the record. I didn't list the receipts. I looked at my father, held his gaze, and said, "Are you done?" Something shifted in his face. The smile didn't disappear. It froze, like a projector catching on a frame. I'd seen my father handle resistance before. Employees, loan applicants. Me when I was younger. He'd never seen me stop resisting. Richard's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen and held up a finger. 1 second. He answered. Speaker wasn't on, but in a room that quiet with the kind of cheap speakerphone Richard owned, you didn't need it. Emily's voice came through, sharp and thin. "Did she sign yet?" "Dad, I need to know by Monday. The landlord's threatening to change the locks." Richard cupped his hand over the phone. "I'm handling it. Give me an hour." But Emily was already mid-sentence. "Just tell her it's for the family." She always caves when you say that. The words landed in the center of the table like glass hitting hardwood. Richard pulled the phone from his ear and ended the call, his neck flushed red from the collar up. Brennan was looking at his legal pad. I folded my hands. "She always caves when you say that," I repeated quietly, word for word. Richard set the phone face down. "She's under a lot of pressure. Don't take it personally." "I'm not taking anything," I said. "I'm just listening." I looked at Brennan. He still hadn't looked up, but the pen in his hand had stopped moving. This was the negotiation my father had prepared for. Push the paper across the table, invoke Grandpa Harold's name, wait for the obedient daughter to sign, drive home by noon. Instead, he was sitting in a room where his youngest daughter had just confirmed out loud, to a witness, that the whole thing was a performance, a machine. Push the lever, watch Morgan fold. I didn't fold. And in that small silence after Emily's voice faded and the room reset itself, I made a decision. They weren't getting a signature. They were getting a conversation they should have had 2 years ago. Richard stood up. The chair screeched against the floor. "Morgan, I've been patient. Sign the paper." He pointed at the quitclaim deed like it was a ledger that didn't balance. "This house means nothing to you. You haven't been there in years." "You're right," I said. "I haven't. Because the last time I visited, you told my husband he was a downgrade." Richard waved his hand. "That was a joke. It wasn't funny." 3 words. I let them sit there. Richard pressed both palms flat on the table. "You know what your problem is? You hold grudges. Your mother was right. You need help. Professional help. Brennan raised a hand. Mr. Hayes, let's keep this productive. Richard didn't look at him. His eyes were locked on me. If you don't sign this, he said, voice dropping into the register he used to deny loan applications, I will take legal action. I'll file a quiet title motion. A judge will make you sign. I turned to Brennan. Can he do that? Brennan shifted. There are legal avenues, but let's not get ahead of, okay, I said. Both men stopped. Okay? I reached for my bag and pulled the folder onto the table. The room felt like the second before a fuse catches. Before we go any further, I said, I have something I'd like to show you. I watched my father's eyes drop to the folder. He didn't know what was in it. Neither did Brennan. But something in the air changed, the way a room changes when the person who's supposed to be losing stops acting like it. I unclipped the folder, opened it, and set the first page face up on the table. The document slid across the mahogany with the soft hiss of good paper on polished wood. Richard looked down. The bold header was impossible to miss. Irrevocable trust deed, Harold R. Hayes Family Trust. This is an irrevocable trust deed, I said. Filed 7 years ago by Harold Hayes with the county clerk's office. Richard's head tilted. What are you talking about? It names me, Morgan Hayes, as sole beneficiary of the cabin property. The trustee is Mr. So Calloway, Grandpa Harold's attorney. I pushed the full document, all 8 pages, certified copy, county stamp on the front, to the center of the table. You're welcome to read it. The silence that followed had weight. It pressed against the walls of that conference room like a held breath. Richard didn't touch the papers. His eyes moved from the document to my face and back again, as though he was waiting for one of them to explain the other. Brennan reached for the trust deed immediately, turned to the first page. Read it, turned to the second. Read that too. Then he removed his glasses, pressed the bridge of his nose and set the document down very carefully, as though it might detonate. And he looked at Richard. I've been in enough meetings, quarterly reviews, tax audits, compliance calls, to recognize the exact moment a professional realizes the ground underneath the conversation has shifted. Brennan's expression didn't change dramatically. He didn't gasp. He didn't curse. He just looked at my father the way a surgeon looks at an X-ray when the break is worse than expected. And Richard, still standing, still leaning on the table with both hands, finally stopped talking. The look on that lawyer's face, I will never forget it. I spent 2 years wondering if I was crazy for walking away. 2 years hearing secondhand that my own parents told people I was broken. And then I sat in a room and watched the truth land on a table in black and white. If you've ever been doubted by the people who were supposed to believe in you, this one's for you. Brennan set the document down and looked at Richard the way a man looks at a client who has just made his job significantly harder. Mr. Hayes, he said, and the formality in his voice was new. Were you aware that your father established an irrevocable trust for this property? Richard's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That can't be right. The house was part of his estate. It came to me through probate. Brennan picked up the trust deed again, turned to the filing page, and read the date. Then he looked back at Richard. According to this document, the property was transferred to the trust 3 years before your father passed away. If this is accurate, and the county filing stamp suggests it is, the cabin would not have passed through probate. It would have been excluded from the estate entirely. Richard stared. That's impossible. The county clerk's office would have the original on file. Brennan continued, speaking now with the deliberate calm of a man measuring every word for liability. I'd recommend verifying. But this copy appears properly executed and notarized. Richard turned to me. His face had gone the color of old drywall. Where did you get this? From Grandpa Harold. He would never. Richard's voice cracked along the seam. He wouldn't go behind my back like this. I held his gaze. He didn't go behind your back. He protected his granddaughter. I paused. There's a difference. The conference room was the quietest place in Tennessee. The clock on the wall ticked. Somewhere outside, a truck downshifted on Main Street. Richard slowly sat back down. His hands, which had been pointing and commanding and tapping all morning, lay flat on the table. They were shaking. Brennan loosened his tie half an inch and turned to me. Miss Hayes, do you have contact information for the trustee? I handed him Calloway's card. Brennan dialed the number on the conference room speaker. It rang twice. Calloway's voice came through, measured, unhurried, the voice of a man who'd been expecting this call for 7 years. Brennan identified himself and asked the question directly, Mr. Calloway, can you confirm the existence and validity of an irrevocable trust established by Harold Hayes regarding the property at 14 Cedar Mill Road? I can. I drafted it myself. The trust was executed and filed with the county 7 years ago. Harold Hayes funded it with the cabin property during his lifetime. Morgan Hayes is the sole named beneficiary. The property has never been part of the Harold Hayes estate and did not pass through probate. Brennan wrote quickly. Richard sat motionless. Is the trust currently active and unchallenged? Brennan asked. Active and unchallenged. I serve as trustee. Brennan thanked him and ended the call. Then he turned to Richard with the careful posture of a man delivering news he didn't want to deliver. Mr. Hayes, I'm going to have to pause this proceeding. The quitclaim deed I prepared is not applicable. Miss Hayes has no claim to waive because the property was never in your father's estate to begin with. Richard shook his head. That's my family's house. I grew up there, I understand. But legally, as of 7 years ago, it belongs to the trust. The sole beneficiary is your daughter. Brennan paused. His voice dropped slightly. Mr. Hayes, I should also mention that if you've represented to the buyer that you hold clear title to this property, that could create a separate legal issue. Richard pushed back from the table. The chair legs stuttered against the floor. You planned this. His voice was tight, strung between accusation and something closer to fear. You've been sitting on this for 7 years, waiting. I didn't plan anything. My voice didn't rise. I didn't even open that envelope until your lawyer sent me a letter. You brought me here, Dad. The word hit the room wrong. Dad, I hadn't called him that in 2 years, and it landed heavier than I expected, for both of us. Richard pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes. When he pulled them away, I saw something I hadn't prepared for. He looked old, not just tired, diminished, like someone had pulled a thread and the whole pattern was unraveling. Morgan, you don't understand, he said. His voice cracked down the center. If I can't sell that house, your sister, the business, I co-signed everything. Your mother and I refinanced the house. We could lose it. Our house. I heard the desperation. I did. And part of me, the part that spent 18 years trying to earn his attention, wanted to reach across the table. But I stayed where I was. You co-signed Emily's business loan, I said. You refinanced your mortgage for her store. You put everything on the line for her, and in all that time, You never once, not once, called to ask how I was doing. Richard's mouth opened, but nothing came out. And now you want me to give up the one thing Grandpa Harold left me so you can fix a problem I wasn't part of creating. He would have wanted us to be a family. He would have wanted you to be a father to both your daughters. The room held its breath. Brennan gathered his legal pad and stood. He had the posture of a man trying to leave a room without tripping anything. I think it's best we adjourn, he said. Mr. Hayes, I'd recommend consulting with a trust litigation attorney for your options. Miss Hayes, you're free to go. I stood, collected the trust documents, and placed them back in my folder. The quitclaim deed still sat in the center of the table, unsigned, like a check that bounced. Richard didn't move. He sat with his hands flat on the table, staring at the grain of the wood as if the answer might be somewhere in the mahogany. Morgan. I stopped at the door. Please, one word, stripped of posture, stripped of strategy, just a man in a conference room who'd run out of moves. I looked at him, and for a second, just a second, I saw the version of him from before. The man who taught me to ride a bike on Cedar Mill Road, who let me steer the boat even though I always went too far left, who once, when I was 7, carried me a quarter-mile through the rain because I'd lost my shoe in the mud and he didn't want me walking barefoot. That man existed. He just got buried somewhere under the spreadsheets and the favoritism and the fear of Emily failing. You know my number, I said. It hasn't changed. I walked through the lobby, past the receptionist, down the stairwell that smelled like old carpet, out the front door. I sat in my car for 5 minutes, engine off, hands on the wheel. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. The kind of tired that 2 years of silence doesn't fix. But the meeting wasn't the end. Richard didn't drive home. He drove to the cabin, and he brought Patricia and Emily with him. Rachel called me that evening. Her voice had the careful pitch of someone trying not to alarm you while delivering alarming news. Your dad drove out to the cabin after the meeting. Your mom and Emily are with him. They're inside. I was standing at the kitchen counter, still in the blouse I'd worn to Brennan's office. Nathan looked up from the stove. They can't sell it, I said. They can't transfer it. Legally, there's nothing they can do. I know. But your dad told your mom it's their family home and no piece of paper changes that. I set the phone on the counter and stared at the ceiling. Nathan turned the burner off. What do you want to do? Call Calloway. Calloway picked up on the first ring this time. I explained the situation. He listened without interrupting, a trait I was beginning to deeply appreciate. They can't do anything to the property, he said. They can't sell it, lease it, or encumber it. If they refuse to leave, I'll send a formal demand letter. If they still refuse, we file for trespass. I closed my eyes. I don't want to have my father arrested at the cabin. Then, let's hope he makes a smarter choice. I thanked him and hung up. Nathan was watching me from across the kitchen with the expression he wears when he's already figured out the wiring, but is waiting for you to ask him to draw it. They'll leave, he said. You think your dad's a banker. At some point, the math is going to beat the pride. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that Richard Hayes, a man who once refused to admit he'd overcooked a steak for 45 minutes, would see reason. He didn't. Not right away. Saturday morning, Rachel sent me a screenshot. Emily had posted a photo on Facebook, the cabin porch. Patricia holding a coffee mug, Richard standing behind her with his arms crossed, looking out at the water. Caption, family time at Grandpa's cabin. Some things are worth fighting for. I stared at the photo for a long time. There was Emily, sitting in Grandpa Harold's chair, the green Adirondack he built himself the summer I turned 10. I'd sanded the armrests. He let me paint the first coat, said I had a steadier hand than he did. That chair was the last place he sat before his legs got too stiff to make it down to the dock. And Emily was posing in it like a prop. The comments rolled in. A few relatives, so glad you're all together. A neighbor, that house holds so many memories. Nobody mentioned me. Nobody asked where I was. One cousin, Eric, who I hadn't spoken to in a year, wrote, "Richard has every right. It's his father's house." I set my phone face down on the nightstand. Nathan brought me coffee without being asked. "Calloway," I said. By Sunday afternoon, a certified letter was en route. Ted Calloway also sent a copy via email for immediacy. The letter read, "You are currently occupying property held in irrevocable trust. This constitutes unauthorized use of trust property. You are hereby requested to vacate the premises within 72 hours." Richard wasn't dealing with a daughter anymore. He was dealing with a legal entity, a county filing, and a trustee who didn't care about Christmas dinners. Emily deleted the Facebook post by Sunday night. The 72-hour clock started ticking. Monday morning, 41 hours left on the clock. My phone rang at 6:47 a.m. The kind of early that means someone either needs bail or believes urgency is a weapon. It was Patricia. I almost didn't answer. But I did, because even after everything, there's a muscle in your chest that contracts when your mother calls. 2 years of silence doesn't atrophy it completely. Morgan, her voice was raw. She'd been crying, or she wanted me to think she had. With my mother, you could never quite tell. "Please, your father can't sleep. Emily's going to lose everything. This is tearing our family apart." I sat on the edge of the bed. Nathan was already awake beside me, eyes open, quiet. "This didn't start with a trust document. Mom, I know we weren't perfect, but is this really what you want? To take the house to punish us?" "I'm not taking anything. It was already mine." A breath on the other end, sharp, offended, "And I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting what Grandpa Harold wanted. Your grandfather wouldn't want this." Her voice went hard. "He would want us together. I have a letter from him that says otherwise." Silence. A long one. The kind where you can hear someone rearranging their entire understanding of a situation. "You've changed," she said finally. It wasn't a compliment. "I hope so." The call ended without a goodbye. Patricia hung up the way she always exited a conversation she couldn't control, abruptly, so she could tell people later that the other person was being difficult. I set the phone down. Nathan looked at me. "You okay?" I nodded. She said, "I've changed." He almost smiled. About time someone noticed. They left on Monday afternoon. 53 hours. Just under the wire. Rachel told me later that Brennan had called Richard one final time. "If you don't vacate, you're facing a trespass complaint. Given the trust documentation, you won't win." Richard packed the car. Patricia collected the dishes she'd brought from home. Emily carried out a bag of groceries she'd stocked the fridge with, like she was moving in for good. They drove away from the cabin the same way they'd driven away from my life, without telling me, without looking back, and without once considering that the house had never been theirs to claim. I didn't go right away. I waited a full week. When I finally drove out to Cedar Mill Road, it was a Thursday afternoon. The sky was flat and gray. The kind of Tennessee spring sky that can't decide between rain and surrender. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the place smelled like dust and old pine. The kitchen was clean. Patricia had wiped down the counters before she left. The couch cushions were straight, the floors swept. On the kitchen table, Richard had left a single key and a torn piece of lined paper. His handwriting looked smaller than I remembered. This was never about the money. "Dad," I read it, folded it, put it in my coat pocket. I didn't know if it was true. I didn't know if he believed it. I didn't know if it mattered. I walked down to the dock. The boards creaked under my weight. Grandpa Harold's chair sat where it always had, facing the water, facing the tree line, facing everything and nothing. I sat in it. The lake was still. A heron crossed the cove, low and unhurried. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The numbers caught up with Richard the way numbers always do, quietly, and then all at once. Without the cabin sale, the $320,000 lifeline evaporated. The buyer walked. Emily's boutique couldn't cover its next quarter's rent. By June, she closed the doors for good. Sold the inventory at 40 cents on the dollar to a liquidator from Chattanooga. Richard's personal guarantee came due. He sold his truck, the F-150 he'd driven since I was in high school, and pulled from his 401k early, eating the penalty. Between the two, he scraped together about $140,000, enough to settle the guarantee, not enough to undo the damage. His retirement, which Richard had planned for 62, got pushed to 67. Maybe later. The mortgage he'd refinanced still hung over the Birchwood house like a permanent weather system. In a town that size, the story traveled, not through gossip columns, but through driveways and church parking lots and the frozen food aisle at the grocery store. People started asking questions Richard couldn't deflect with a firm handshake. Why didn't he know about his own father's trust? Did Harold really cut Richard out? And that daughter, the one they said was unstable, she had the paperwork the whole time. Richard stopped going to Rotary Club breakfasts, stopped lingering at the bank after hours. He'd come and go through the side entrance and eat lunch at his desk. Rachel told me all of this in pieces. Not to gloat, not because I asked. She told me because she thought I deserved to know how the story I'd been exiled from was ending. I listened. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call Richard to say I told you so. There's no satisfaction in watching your father shrink. There's just the truth and the silence that follows it. Emily took a job as an assistant manager at a furniture store in the next town over. Not a bad job, honest work, steady hours, but a long fall from boutique owner, the title she'd embroidered on her business cards and pinned to every conversation for 2 years. She didn't post about it on Facebook. Patricia pulled back from everything. She stopped attending the women's Bible study group she'd run for a decade, stopped organizing the fall festival, stopped showing up to Sunday brunch at the Millstone Cafe, where she'd held court every weekend for as long as I could remember. Rachel told me why. People keep asking about you. How's Morgan? Have you heard from Morgan? Your mom doesn't know what to say anymore. The narrative she'd built, poor Patricia, abandoned by her unstable daughter, suffering in silence, had developed cracks. The trust documents were public record. The timeline didn't lie. And in a small town, when the facts start to outrun the fiction, the storyteller loses the room. I didn't feel triumphant about any of it. I didn't want my mother embarrassed. I just wanted her to stop rewriting my life for other people. Then, 3 weeks after the boutique closed, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I hadn't seen in 2 years. Emily, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I'm sorry about what I said on the phone that day. I read it sitting on the dock at the cabin, feet dangling over the water. I didn't respond right away. But I didn't delete it. A week later, Rachel mentioned something else. Your dad asked about you. He wanted to know if you were doing okay. He didn't ask me to pass it along, he just asked. I let that sit. The extended family came back in pieces, not all of them, not all at once. But enough. My aunt called first. She was the one who'd looked at the floor during that Christmas dinner. The one who heard Patricia call me unstable and said nothing. I should have spoken up that night, she said. Her voice had the weight of someone carrying a sentence she couldn't put down. I saw what was happening, and I didn't say a word. I'm sorry, Morgan. I thanked her. I meant it. I didn't pretend it erased anything, and she didn't ask me to. 2 cousins texted within the same week. One of them wrote, I always felt something was off. I just didn't know what it was. I understood that. I lived inside the thing and couldn't name it for years. How could I expect people on the outside to see it clearly? Not everyone came around. My uncle still believed Richard's version. A cousin who'd commented on Emily's Facebook post never reached out. A few relatives went quiet entirely, not hostile, just absent. The way people get when a story becomes too complicated to fit into a side. I didn't chase anyone. I didn't post a rebuttal. I didn't send a family-wide email with receipts and timestamps and a subject line that read for the record. I just kept living. Senior financial analyst, cabin on weekends, Nathan rewiring the porch lights. Coffee on the dock in the mornings. People who needed to know the truth found it. People who didn't want it stayed comfortable in the version they already had. I made peace with both. Not everyone will understand. And I stopped needing them to. Nathan and I started fixing up the cabin in May. It wasn't a renovation, more like a conversation with the building, listening to what it needed. A fresh coat of stain on the dock. New screens on the porch. The bathroom faucet that had dripped since I was 12 finally got a new cartridge. Nathan handled the electrical, replaced the ancient breaker panel, ran new wire to the kitchen, installed a porch light that actually turned on when you flipped the switch. It's what I do, he said, grinning, covered in attic dust. I found Grandpa Harold's woodworking tools in the garage, hanging on a pegboard he'd built himself. Each one in its place, chisels lined up by size, hand planes oiled and wrapped. A half-finished birdhouse on the workbench, like he'd stepped away for lunch and just never came back. In a box beneath the workbench, I found photographs. Me at 6 years old, standing on the dock with a bass that was almost as long as my arm. Grandpa Harold behind me, both hands raised, laughing, his hat pushed back, his flannel rolled to the elbows. I held the photo for a long time. He didn't leave me a house. He left me proof that I mattered, that someone in my family saw me clearly. Not as the strong one, not as the low-maintenance one, not as the one who didn't need anything, but as Morgan, his granddaughter, worth protecting. I framed the photo and hung it on the kitchen wall, right above the window where the afternoon light comes in warm and gold. Every time I look at it, I hear his voice on the phone the day I graduated. I already took care of it. Grandpa, he did. A month after the meeting at Brennan's office, I sat at the kitchen table in the cabin and wrote a letter by hand. Not through a law firm, not through Rachel. Just me and a pen and a piece of paper. I wrote it to Richard and Patricia. I'm not writing to punish you. I'm writing to be clear. The cabin stays in the trust. That was Grandpa Harold's decision, and I intend to honor it. I will not sell it, and I will not sign it away. If there's a version of our relationship that can be rebuilt, it doesn't start with paperwork. It starts with honesty. It starts with you seeing me. Not as the strong one, not as the one who can handle it, not as the one who doesn't need anything, but as your daughter. My door is open, but only if you walk through it as my parents, not as people who need something from me. I addressed the envelope, stamped it, and dropped it in the mailbox at the end of Cedar Mill Road. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't check the mailbox every morning hoping for one. I'd said what I needed to say. The rest was up to them. Nathan read the letter before I sealed it. He didn't suggest a single change. He just nodded and said, "That's you." I used to think boundaries were walls, things you build when you're angry to keep people out. I don't think that anymore. Boundaries are doors. You choose who walks through. You choose the terms. And if someone stands on the other side and knocks with clean hands and an honest voice, you open it, but you don't leave it propped open for people who only show up when they need the key. It's a Friday afternoon when I finally understand what Grandpa Harold meant. I'm sitting on the dock in his green Adirondack chair, the one I sanded when I was 10, the one I painted the first coat on, the one Emily posed in for a photo she later deleted. The wood is warm from the sun, the lake is flat. Somewhere across the cove, a fish breaks the surface, and the ripple stretches out in slow, patient circles. Nathan is inside making coffee. I can hear the kettle through the open window and the low hum of the porch light he installed last weekend. The breeze carries cedar and cut grass, and something sweet from the neighbor's honeysuckle. I've got Grandpa Harold's fishing rod in my hands, the old one with the cork grip he wrapped himself, the reel that clicks when you cast. I haven't caught anything all afternoon, and I don't care. I talk to him sometimes, not out loud, just in my head. The way you do with people who left the room but never really left. "Hey, Grandpa, I found your envelope. I found the trust. I found the letter." A pause. The wind answers, "Thank you." I look down at my hands. They're rough now, from sanding, from painting, from living. Not the hands of someone who was treated gently, the hands of someone who built what she has, one board at a time. My name is Morgan Hayes. I'm 32 years old. 2 years ago, my parents' lawyer sent me one document. That document didn't give me anything I didn't already have. It just reminded me that someone had already decided I was worth protecting. And that was enough. If you made it all the way here, thank you. I mean that. This story isn't about revenge. It's about knowing you deserve to be seen, even when the people closest to you refuse to look. So here's my question. If you could write one letter to someone who underestimated you, what would it say? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, hit that like button and subscribe to Winds of Thought so you don't miss what's coming next. I'll see you in the next one.